Yes, people, back in the building once again. United State of Mind. It's been a little bit of a minute, and I'm conscious of the fact that the last video for United State of Mind on the channel is just talking about Ten Hag and is he staying, is he going? Well, we already know what is happening right now. He's been sacked. United have a new manager in place and also an interim in place right now. Obviously, we've gone through 3 games, I believe, of Ruben Amorim. He's about to end his time as the interim coach anyway, against Leicester tomorrow. And then Ruben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon has been appointed as the new head coach of Manchester United moving forward by Ineos. So, we're doing state of play. I think this is part 4 now. And I'm just going to go through Ten Hag, his tenure, not spend too much time on that, then onto the appointment of Ruben Amorim and all of that, and what that may unfold or what's going to entail. And then just kind of round off the video from there. But before I do anything, people make sure you hit that like button, subscribe button as well if you're new, hit the notification bell and all of that good stuff right there. Let's get into the video. So, Ten Hag sacked. It's been a while. I think it's been at least a couple of weeks now. Or it's close to for 2 weeks now, I think it is. And I just wanted to go through, because obviously the last few videos I've been thinking about him trying to turn it around, and I wanted him to turn it around. I feel like maybe he could have been given another opportunity or enough opportunity to be able to turn it around. And unfortunately, this doesn't work out that way. It is what it is. But let's talk about some high points of his time as the manager. So, obviously winning the League Cup, which I think is very important for any new manager coming into a top club. You've heard Pep and Jose speak about the importance of winning the League Cup because it's the first trophy that you have an opportunity to win in the course of a season. So him doing that in his first season was really a bit of a high point for him in his career at Manchester United. And then achieving that 3rd place in that first season, which I thought was to be honest with you, when I didn't have much expectations for him coming into that first season because I thought he was going to come in and try and embed his style from the beginning, and it didn't happen. And then, there was obviously we knew there was some compromise to the way he wanted to play. And then we didn't have the personnel per se, and then able to achieve 3rd place from a low position of 7th place. I think we were where we ended the season before is kind of a really big jump. So the fact that he was able to do that in his first season, you could see that there was a feeling around the club that this could be the right man to take us forward, and for whatever reason just did not pan out that way. And then we can speak about the FA Cup win at the end of last season, which we were pretty much unfancied in that FA Cup final. We were the underdogs. Probably could have been very lucky to even got to that final, to be honest with you, because Coventry City, that semi-final was really a shocker. We were away and clear, and they got back into the game, and they nearly took us out of the game there. But for him to win that FA Cup in albeit a really poor season for Manchester United standards, I think is a high point for him in his own right, because it's another trophy and medal that you can attach to your name. So those are the high points. In terms of the low points, there's quite a lot. I can't even lie. So we talk about that 7-0 defeat against Liverpool, which nobody would have thought that would have happened, especially if you remember watching that game in the first half. United had 2 to 3 chances to put the ball away, and then the conversation changes. And I feel like throughout his tenure, I think, especially in this last season and a bit, if goals are put into the back of the net and we win certain games, the conversations are different. Maybe he stays in his job. But ultimately, that was a really big one. I feel like a lot of people did overreact at that particular point in time, because I feel like because of the rivalry, people feel like we shouldn't lose those games in that manner and things of that nature. And I get that and I understand that. But yeah, it was like a little blip in the middle of a season where it was pretty successful for him in his first season. So, but it is a low point when you now look at it in its entirety. Then you have the 6-3 defeat to Manchester City away. I think that was his 4th game in charge. Still trying to get his team together. That was a pretty bad defeat because I think we were 4-0 down at half time. So that wasn't really a good way of kind of introducing yourself to the Manchester derby, for example, for Ten Hag. So that is definitely a low point. And I think Foden scored a hat-trick that day. So it was just a bit of a crazy game in the end. Then I think in that same season we lost to City 3-0 at home, which was like they basically came there and it was like a training session essentially, right? Like, and you're expecting a Manchester United manager to galvanize, or he shouldn't have to. I think for a Manchester derby, every player needs to be up for it because you know how important it is for the city's pride and then the fans and all of this type of stuff. And for whatever reason, United just were passive that day, and I don't know if that was down to tactics or if that was down to players just not giving what they need to give on the pitch. And I'll speak about that in a little bit of detail as well, what I mean by that, right? Because it's going to be important for Ruben Amorim and his tenure at Manchester United if it's going to be successful. And then towards the end of last season, not last season, was it not? Towards the end of last season, the 4-0 defeat away to Palace. Now that was bad because, you know, it just compounded another defeat that compounded our away record under Ten Hag. You know, pretty poor, especially from the statistics that you look at from last season. And that really just capped off a really poor. I think we played them in May, so it was really towards the end of the season, and it capped off a really poor away campaign for Manchester United in the league, and a poor season overall. So that's that, and then obviously the Champions League run that we had. I mean, you know, getting knocked out of the Champions League altogether in a group consisting of Bayern Munich, Copenhagen, and Galatasaray really shouldn't be happening, and that's a low point. I mean, I wouldn't attribute it all to Ten Hag. I feel like Andre Onana was pretty bad, to be honest with you. During that campaign, he cost us a lot of games in that competition, which contributed to us being knocked out. But ultimately, Onana's still at the club, and the manager's going to get sacked because of things like that. So, you know, that was pretty poor as a low point. And I feel like just to kind of end it on the Ten Hag kind of piece before I move on to the real like meat of this video. I actually wanted him to turn things around. Like I feel like you don't want to see somebody lose their job, and obviously for him, he's getting paid £17 million, like, or whatever it is, right, to be released from his contract early. So for him, there's a financial gain in it, so there's no problem, right? And then at the same time, it's like you really wanted him to be successful because we don't want to be going down this cycle again of now a new manager's coming in and everyone's getting excited for this new manager. And then if things don't work out the way that people are hoping for, you're looking for another manager in another 2 years or so. So it's like, I'm not really too enthused by that idea. I'm not really like, I want to see someone go through the trenches, come out on the other side. Like, but I think there's a fine line when results are continuing to be negative. The only person you can really look at that point is the manager. Like, you get rid of him, bring someone else to try and change things. So that's what United have done, and that's what Ineos have done. And then this last point, I think there was some criticism of his communication skills and lack of charisma, which is interesting because I feel like charisma is also attributed to a person's personality. We know that like Dutch people generally, like, and I don't want to be offensive here when I say this, but like they're very blunt, you know, very straightforward type of people. We've had an experience of it with Louis van Gaal and the way he was. He was a big character, but he was quite harsh, quite blunt, quite straightforward. And I feel like that's just attributed to a lot of Dutch people. Like, just generally, if you're Dutch and you come across this video, don't be offended. Let me know if it's wrong. But I think there was that element. So when you have a lack of charisma, especially when you're trying to galvanize a group to go to go on this type of mission where you're trying to become the top team in the league again, become the top team in Europe again, you need an abundance of charisma because you're going to have to, you know, wear a lot of different hats and talk to a different lot of people, talk to a lot of different people, and, you know, be able to navigate through this murky waters that you have as Manchester United manager, one of the top managers in the world. And I felt like, well, I don't feel like it, but people have said that he lacked that. I've never been around this, so I don't know, but people will say this. And then obviously his communication skills, like lending more towards maybe what he was trying to get across on the training field, which would have translated onto the pitch. Maybe there was a lack of communication and a communication barrier. Not to say that, as I've said this in a previous video, not to say his English is bad, but maybe he's not able to structure things in the right way that people will understand clearly and concisely. So it may have overcomplicated things, and then it meant that, you know, we see the failings on the training field, and then we see the failings on the pitch ultimately. So yeah, it wasn't good to see him lose his job, but I think it was the right decision to be made, because you're on a constant slide going down the table. You know, in Europa League, you're not, you know, in contention for those knockout stage, like even the playoff or just straight through to the knockout stages. And United had to do what they needed to do. Ineos did what they needed to do, and I was actually quite surprised to see them, you know, act so quickly and like getting rid of Ten Hag and then bringing in Amorim as an appointment. But I have to ask this question, right? Why did Ineos delay the decision? So if you're gonna sack him, it probably made more sense for you to sack him in the summer, right? Where you could have started the season with your own man. And I always thought that if Ineos were coming in, at first we thought they were coming to buy the club, but they only took a percentage of the club. But then they was able to negotiate the sporting interest, to be in control of sporting interest. At that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, you've come in mid-season, so you're not going to do anything. You're just going to wait and let it play out, see what happens. Fine. At that point, once you've done your review, you've observed everything, your mission already would have been, we want to bring in our own man because we want to do things our way. They didn't do that, which is strange, right? Ultimately, you know, they've allowed some leeway for the manager in place and said, we will put a structure around you. How do you perform within that? And it didn't work out anyway, because ultimately you would have already handpicked managers that would have fit what your model is, and then deploy it from the off when you had the opportunity to, and they didn't do so. So I mean, like, they should have started the season with their own man. They should have sacked Ten Hag in the summer. They shouldn't have waited all this time. I feel like that was the wrong decision by Ineos, whoever was involved in that decision making. If it's Barada, if it's Ashworth, like, those people made the wrong decisions there. And I feel like Ratcliffe already was quite unhappy with the way the season ended and was very furious at the fact that Ten Hag was continued his tenure as a manager through to the new season. So I mean, there's that. And then obviously Ruud was appointed as the interim, and he's come through 3 games, so it's 2 wins. I think 2 wins out of 3, I think it is. So he's won in the League Cup against Leicester, drew with Chelsea last Sunday, and then obviously won the Europa League game just gone by against Poak. So it's like, you know, I was wrong about that, by the way, with Ruben Amorim. I thought he was brought in by Ineos to kind of steal a march on the potential like manager market, maybe let him be integrated within it whilst Ten Hag is like kind of phased out and then he comes in. But it looks like Ineos have already picked what they wanted, and they're going against that backroom staff that they chose. Like, it's such a weird situation. It's like, why'd you bring this guy in, you know, and then now he's going to get sacked, most likely, because I don't think they're going to be able to keep him on in any capacity with Amorim and his backroom stuff, because Amorim apparently is bringing in 7 people, you know, to come alongside him. So, you know, it's a bit of a strange decision to bring in an assistant coach and another assistant coach, and then just kind of like, obviously it's fine, he's coming interim and he's doing his thing, and then now he's gonna probably have to go, but like, it just didn't make sense for me. And it begs the question, was the decision making by Ineos methodical, like they were taking their time with it, or was it just like they just were indecisive and they just didn't know what to do, and now they've been forced to make their decisions what they should have probably done a lot earlier? I mean, it is what it is. But now we are here with the Ruben Amorim era. Now, I'm not going to do what I did last time. And I feel like when the news dropped, you saw everybody, content creators, the media, like mainstream media, coming up with everything. You know, his tactics, what he's been doing in his career and all of that. I did this for Ten Hag. I did, like, not in like super detail, but I remember doing a live stream and talking about Ten Hag and his tactics and what he's done in his career and blah, blah, blah. I'm not doing that this time. Like, because I'm now at that point where it's like, I'm fed up with all of this. I just want to sit back and let this manager come in and do what he needs to do. Right? I can't even lie. I preferred Nagelsmann. And I know that there was some, you know, issues. There's going to be issues surrounding that because obviously he's in the job right now. Probably wants to stay in charge of this German national team for this cycle because he has a chance at history. He could be the youngest coach ever, I believe, to win a World Cup. I don't know if Germany will be one of the favorites, but he will definitely want that chance, and to take that away from him so early on in his career probably not. He may want to manage United at some point in his career, but right now probably wasn't the time, and probably United weren't able to get him out of that position. But I would have preferred him. The reason why is because I feel like he's a young manager, just like Amorim is, but he has way more experience at the top level than Amorim already, right? So obviously Leipzig and what he's done at Leipzig, there's a lot of support there. Obviously, Christopher Vivel, who's the head of recruitment, obviously has some workings and some dealings with him. But then you go to Bayern Munich, which is the top job in Germany. It's not a foregone conclusion, as Thomas Tuchel found out. It's not a foregone conclusion for you to go and win there. And he wins there, right? And then now you're at the German national team level, and it's like that's a high pressure job as well. So you've gone through a couple of high pressure situations. So you will have the right attitude, the right mindset coming into this Manchester United job, knowing it's a huge challenge, and you're not fazed by it. I'm not to say that Amorim isn't fazed by it, but fazed by what is going to be ahead of him. It's just that we have like visual like proof that Nagelsmann wouldn't be fazed by taking on a job like Manchester United, taking a fallen giant and trying to put them right back on top of the pedestal. Like, but it didn't work out that way, and Amorim is appointed. Fine. One thing I do want to say though to United fans is like you have to exercise caution. Like you cannot be doing what you've done with Ten Hag and previous managers at this point. It doesn't make any sense. The managers come in, a new process is now starting all over again. There are players at the club that will fit into what they want to do with the head coach and the sporting direction. He's come in based on the analytics. They've picked this manager as one of several managers as the one or the top one to come in and do what they need to do. They've had a summer window, which in hindsight now looks like they were already preparing for the new managers to come in, but they just didn't know at what point. You've brought in a couple of extra centre backs because you want the manager to play a style with three at the back. We already have 3 or 4 centre backs at the club anyway, so now there's going to be a bit more depth in that area, and you'll tweak that as January or summer or whatever happens in terms of contracts and whatnot. So you have to put in this new process to fit a style of play that a manager is coming in to deploy. That's going to take time. There's no time on the training field, so this is going to be happening in games on the fly. Players are going to have to be like willing to buy into this if they want to have a successful season. For some of them, if they want to be at the club moving forward, like they're going to have to buy into this fairly quickly. It's interesting the time that they've decided to bring him in just after this weekend's game against Leicester. Then he comes in international break. We'll have like a week and a half to work with players who don't go on international break. So that should be interesting. And it's going to be what's going to happen from that first game, because from that first game, if we see a tweak to the way he actually wants to play, that'll be interesting. Because obviously I've watched him. I haven't watched much of him, so that's why I'm not speaking much about him. But having watched the game against Manchester City for him, it was an interesting game. They conceded a lot of possession. They played on the counter, but you can see what he's trying to do. Now, that's not going to translate into the Premier League because we already know that this league is very unforgiving. You have to have good technical players, but you also have to have players with a good physical attribute and players with a good mentality too. When you look through that Manchester United squad, you don't really see many, so it's going to be interesting to see how he fares with that. But yeah, it's a new process, so you have to exercise patience. You have to wait for him to figure out what he needs to do, and I feel like some fans will already give him the rest of the season and say, "Yeah, you've come in mid-season, or it's not mid-season, but like early on in the season." You have some time to, make your mistakes and get them out of the way and figure out what you want to do on the pitch and what your personnel is going to be. And then from next season, we'll judge you. Even from next season, I'm not judging, because what happens in the summer? I wonder if across the course of this season, he makes the decision to say, these people cannot move forward in the process that you want me to head up here, right? And then we have an influx of players that come through that suit what he wants or what the club sporting direction needs to be moving forward. And more players exit, no continuity. So you're having to, figure things out as you're going on again, but at least with a pre-season in place. That's interesting. So let's see what happens there. I do think that Amorim needs to to tweak his tactical approach to English football, because I say tweak, but do not compromise, because it's not going to work like for like here. Like, the fact of the matter is based on some of the stuff that I've kind of lent into in terms of like just picking up some data and things to speak about in this video, because I don't want to go too deep into the tactics, because we don't know what they're actually going to look like when he comes here, right? He has a style, but it might not translate here. And he even said it himself, by the way, after the Manchester City game. But like, he'll need to adapt it and tweak it to English football, because it's just a bit different. Like, you're not going to get away with what you get away with Sporting Lisbon. You have a lot more individual quality that can get you through games, and make your wins a lot, let's say, a lot larger. In Portugal, they won't really get you much here. Like, if you compare our squad in terms of individual quality to some of the other top teams in the league, it's like we're a bit far up. We might be far off, but we might not be, because I feel like the players are not playing to the levels that they need to or they can do. So we might be a little bit closer, but man for man, there's some better teams and squads out there. So it's like, you know, like, you're not gonna be able to get away with that. So you're gonna have to get a group of players that's gonna really fight for each other and really go above and beyond their actual capabilities to be able to see success. I think, especially in this first period that you're there at the club, I feel like it shouldn't compromise like Ten Hag did. Ten Hag compromised literally from day one, right? After the 4-0 defeat against Brentford, which we'll speak about some stuff that happened after that later, he started Eriksen in the 6th position in the midfield, and we got overran in that game against Brentford. And from that game onwards, he switched his tactical approach. And he should never have done that, right? You should have rather stick to your principles, stick to your guns, and then just go with it. And then you could at least say, these things work, these things don't. These players work, these players don't. So then things would have been shaped a lot more for him, and maybe he would have been a bit more successful. But at the same time, that's probably not true, because he didn't have sporting direction in front of him to help him say yes, no. And this is the interesting thing. Ruben Amorim has no veto power, apparently. So the club will be making the decisions. He will just be coaching those decisions. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, hopefully he doesn't compromise from day one. Hopefully he sticks to his guns. Play your 3 at the back. Play the way you want to play. And let's see if it actually does translate to the Premier League. It probably won't, but let's see if it does. And if it doesn't, then hopefully there's some work happening between the people in charge of the sporting direction, so Ashworth and Barada, with him, and they speak about how did they translate his style, what he wants, into the Premier League with the right personnel. Let's see what happens there. I think the most important thing for Ruben Amorim, though, is he needs to rebuild the culture of the club. And I think back to like what Fergie did. And I hate doing the comparisons, right? It's so bad. But ultimately, if we look at it in real detail, right, Manchester United have had only 2 successful periods in its whole 120 plus year history, right? The Busby years, Ferguson years. Everything in between, we've not been good. That's the reality. We've been so lucky that in the previous 26, well, it's more than that now, so let's call it 38 years now, right? We had a manager that came in with a complete plan of how to take the club from where it was in the wilderness right back to the top. And it started with a certain culture. We don't have that. We've lost our way, right? And it's like, you have to lean on the things that made you successful. And that's mainly youth, right? Trusting youth. And I'm not just talking about from Carrington and the academy. I'm talking about hand-picking young players with potential, I want to say with star potential, right? Because we've done that over the years. We've picked players from like you think about Andy Cole, for example. We picked him from Newcastle, and turned him into a star. You think about Cantona. You pluck him from Leeds, and he became a star. Like we had to do those types of things to add it to the young players that were already in the squad to really bolster it. And like we have a budding talent machine at Carrington. We spent so much money over the last 12 years on all of these different pieces that just ultimately they didn't help the team. If you trusted in your youth and then spent bigger money on real surefire players that could come in that would raise the quality within your squad and trust in the young players to develop within that, we probably would have been way more successful. But I'll put that to the side. I feel like, yeah, rebuilding the culture of the club. So now where we lost our way, we're trying to build that back. I feel like that wing play, that wide play, especially if Amorim is going to bring the wing backs and all of that. I don't know how that's going to work. I'm not really a fan of wing back systems. I like wingers, right? But it is what it is. He has to shake things up, right? Like, he has to come in and he's going to just say, it's my way or the highway for everybody, right? He has to be radical. So, like, he's going to have to be very, like, he's going to have to do things that would seem out of place, but will actually help us in the long run. Create a siege mentality amongst the squad and motivate them to the point where if they don't give 100% in every single game, every single moment, then they failed. Because at the end of the day, I feel like as a fan, we've been cheated over the last 12 years. Every single player that's come to the club, doesn't matter if you like them, you don't like them, they definitely could have given 110% more than what they've given us. So if you're going to the stadiums every week and United players are failing to cover more grass than the other team, especially if you're going like home and away, because that's how we're supposed to play. If they're not covering every single blade of grass more than the other team, they failed. They failed 100%, right? Because, and I'm not saying running around like headless chicken. I'm saying put in the yards. You have to press up against your opponent when they have the ball. You can't leave a few yards off and let a player cross a ball in or let a player take a shot. You can't do that, right? Have to be aggressive in that approach too. So that's going to be interesting if that translates, because I feel, except for the players that have come in during the summer, everybody else there's an indictment on them, right? Where they've not given what I believe some of their capabilities actually is. Some of those players have given a lot less than what they're actually capable of doing. So he has to be able to shake that out of some of those players, and I feel like that would be the remit, because I doubt we're going to see the same type of cycle of incoming of 6 players and rebuild this. Because ultimately, if I was him, and I like, just me being radical, right? If I was him and I had a radical hat on my head, right? In the summer, I'm getting rid of 5 players: Lindelof, Eriksen, Casemiro, who else? Luke Shaw. And there's one more player that I have like in my mind that just has to leave, because what will happen is, who's that other player? I'm just trying to think. So it's Lindelof, Shaw, Casemiro. Who's the other player? Lindelof, Shaw, Casemiro. Johnny Evans. I think Johnny Evans is the other one, and there's one more. Eriksen. Yeah, those 5. I think Casemiro, you can get some money out of that one. Luke Shaw, like some of these guys, you're not going to get much money out of. Fine, like they're not going to be like a huge amount of money. But then I'm promoting 5 of our most promising youngsters into the current squad that we have, and say, let's go with this. I think that will mean that we stick to the principles that have helped us become successful over the years, and you have some talent around them, good players. Like you look at Mazraoui, you look at De Ligt, you look at Rashford, you look at Garnacho, Mainu. Like there's good talent there, like that you can just continue to push forward. Obviously, Rashford is now at a stage in his career, and you've got Bruno, who's at a stage in his career. But some of the other young players, that up and coming, you can coach them, you can really get a lot out of them. So I mean, like, that's what I would do if I was being radical. But hey, if you disagree with that, let me know in the comments. But one thing I would say to Amorim as some advice, boy, be wary of the media. They build you up to destroy you. That is what happens every single time. It happened with Ten Hag. We were all talking about, oh, look at the Champions League run, and look how radical he's being, and blah, 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 blah. And then they started destroying it. And they're doing it with Amorim too. They've already started, praising him. Oh, look what he done at Sporting, 4 seasons. He's won a title twice. He's done this, he's done that. Look at the way he played. Look at the Man City game. Look at all the plaudits he's going to get. they're gonna destroy you if you don't like have a clear style of play and things like this. If things don't translate the way that you were successful at sporting, they might destroy you. I'll give you an example though. This is an interesting one, right? So there was an example of so I'm going back to that Brentford game as one of the low points for Ten Hag during his tenure. When we lost that game, it came out that the following day, Ten Hag ordered the players to run the differential of kilometers between themselves as a team, United and Brentford, run that distance because they failed to match the distance covered by Brentford in the game. And apparently Ten Hag actually joined them in running that. I guess it would have been across the pitch or across the field, like maybe laps, I don't know, right? In that away loss, yeah. And then it came out at the end of his tenure that players hated coming in for extra training the day after a loss. So it's like, at one point it was praised that Ten Hag implementing something that punishes the players for not giving 110%. And he even joined them in that punishment to say, hey, that loss was on me and you guys. And what was being said was that it was bringing the group together, and trust between the manager and the players. And then at the end, it was, well, we didn't actually like doing the extra training, but it's like, why did you lose the game? You missed your chances. You didn't put in a tackle when you were supposed to put in a tackle. You weren't concentrating when a ball came in. So it's like, you can't have it both ways. But as an example of like media being praising you, building you up, and then destroying you at the end. Like, he needs to be wary of that. If I was him, I'm banning certain. I'll do what Fergie did. He banned certain journalists, like somebody that's always bringing negative stories and like just making things up. You got to ban those types of people from the dressing room, so from the press conferences, and like you shouldn't actually give a shit like about what people say. Doesn't matter if it's the media, it doesn't matter if it's sideline reporters and all these, like, you shouldn't care what anybody says. Do what you need to do. Stick to your guns. But hey, man, that is State of Play episode 4, I believe it is. What do you guys think of Amorim's appointment? He's actually coming very, very soon, so I'm glad I dropped this video before he arrived. And what do you think is going to happen for the rest of the season now with him in charge? Like, is it going to end up becoming a successful season? Will we go on a massive run that could see us, in the Premier League's top 4, and then maybe potentially winning 1-2 trophies? Who knows? Are you excited by the appointment? Did you want somebody else? Let me know in the comments, people. But look, this is going to be the end of the video. Make sure you're hitting that like button, subscribe button as well. If you're new, hit the notification bell. And we out, people. Peace.